What we know is that poverty makes children vulnerable. Currently, according to the National Report Card in America, 65% of fourth graders in the U.S. don't read on grade level. The Atlanta child murder victims were steeped in poverty, and we can bet that there was low quality education in that environment. In this book, Dr. Liebert talks about an Atlanta predator, while I discuss today's predators in our government, pharmaceutical companies, corporate America. And what's their preying ground? The preying ground is our public school system. It's got to stop.
In 1981, I was called into the missing and murdered children of Atlanta case after having written the profile on Ted, a serial lust murderer in Seattle, who turned up in Florida and became the Ted Bundy case. As a result of that, I was called to Atlanta because there were children being killed at a higher rate than ever before. And I was called in because of my experience with the Ted Bundy case. This was really the question: was this interracial violence or was this black on black violence? We brainstormed the case in a hotel room with two psychiatrists, a member of the Department of Justice, and the chief of police of Atlanta, Lee Brown. And it became apparent to both me and the psychiatrist who had worked on the John Gacy case in Chicago that we were probably looking at a very lethal homosexual lust killer, serial killer like John Gacy, and probably coming from the privileged class of Atlanta rather than the class of the victims, which he preyed upon by offering them rap music deals.
I am fortunate to be on this book with you, to be a co-author with you, Dr. Liebert. I found the case fascinating, and I remember when you first presented it to me to read, and I couldn't put it down. I was fascinated by it because I couldn't believe that someone in the neighborhood who was supposed to be a protector of young children would do such a heinous thing. That was my first impression. And then secondly, it was a tough case for me to read. It was tough for me to even do some of the background research that had to be done. These were young kids, and I'm an educator. So I was a teacher for a number of years, for over a decade, and it was hard for me to see these kind of things happening to children. But what disturbs me most today, and we do bring that story up to date, what disturbs me most today is that we still have huge pockets of poverty, like the poverty that these children endured in Atlanta 40 years ago. And one of the things that is a direct pipeline to poverty is education, is low quality education, which we see all across the country now. It's not just in poor neighborhoods anymore, it's everywhere. And what we talk about in the book and what we bring to the fore is that our kids today don't have the luxury of LGBTQIA curriculums or the luxury of social justice lessons and teachers who want to make social justice warriors. We have a serious reading deficit in this country.
I'd also like to bring up the role of the media in the Atlanta missing and murdered children case. There was a tremendous amount of hype because if it were clearly just a black on black case of inner city violence where children were being killed by either each other or families, etc., probably the world wouldn't have been interested. What interested the world was the possibility that this was white supremacist targeting of innocent and helpless black children. In fact, there was some plotters discovered who had considered killing black children, but they were scattered, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigations had pretty much screened them out. So the media hype was not really based on any evidence whatsoever. In fact, it would be almost impossible for a white man to get into the areas where these children were found dead.
You didn't profile Captain Peggs in particular.
No.
This was before you left Atlanta. One of the last things you told the police was, if I remember correctly, because you and I have had many conversations about this,
Right.
The last thing you told police was there's going to be a place where they hook up, where this person is luring them.
Right.
Okay, and so then you left after that, and
Right.
it ended up being this Captain Peggs.
Right, I did not know what Captain Peggs was.
Yeah. So you were dead on.
I'll never forget Captain Peggs. It's probably the lousiest restaurant in Atlanta.
I think it's closed now, so you're okay saying that, you know.
And there's some very good restaurants in Atlanta, by the way. Captain Peggs was a little just fish restaurant, and Wayne Williams, that's where he went. Once it was discovered that, oh, this was not, a white supremacist plot. This was not the South African intelligence. This was a black lust killer, like the mirror image of John Gacy in Chicago.
But the Atlanta police never said that Wayne Williams was a serial lust murder, but you did.
They still don't.
And you still do today.
They still don't.
You think there was a sexual element to the case?
A lot of what you say, unfortunately, will never be revealed. It will never be elucidated because they jumped to conclusions, and they were going down the wrong path, and they didn't want to. They don't want this to be the narrative.
That there was a sexual angle to this
What
case.
we're talking about, they don't want this to be the narrative.
Well, it's not in their world anyway.
Right.
And the media never covered it that way.
And this is why, and this is why I went on national TV and pleaded not to execute Ted Bundy, because there were so many questions that were unanswered about Ted Bundy, and he was talking, and he agreed to talk to me, but they killed him before I had a chance to talk to him. I think he would have answered a lot of questions.
Well, this is your field, and so and these are your subjects.
Yeah, but they didn't, it's almost like they didn't want to know. And they didn't want to know, so one of the psychiatrists went away and said, perhaps he's just evil. Helen Morrison was her name. And that's where it was left. Well, a little more than that, but we'll never know, because there's not enough light shown in the field, and that's the tragedy of the Atlanta case. There's so much we do not know.
Well, and then there's some that we discovered, which ended up in this book. We tell the whole story about these boys. That backstory, I think I'm gonna cry, because these kids died before they died. It was really nasty stuff was happening to them, and it never came out.
But
and
we
the
don't
police
know.
didn't want it to come out. One of the reasons they said, that I heard, I think from you, was that they wanted people to be sympathetic toward these boys. That's why they didn't bring out all the nasty stuff that was happening to some of them behind the scenes. But we bring it out in the book, though.
But he was privileged,
Yeah, Wayne Williams was privileged.
He was privileged. Nobody got into the schools. The schools were closed, Nobody but Wayne Williams, because he wouldn't do something like this.
Yeah.
because he came from a privileged education profession family. And so he was the least suspected person. But so was Ted Bundy. Now, when the news is juxtaposed between the war and whether we should be more aggressive and establish our power or be more reactive to what Russia does, we are faced with the question, are we a second-rate power? And listening to you, I had the feeling that the children of Atlanta really spoke to us about how we are potentially becoming a second-rate power.
Absolutely. And when we talk about the word power, where does our power lie? It lies in our youth, which are our future. And right now we're not doing so well. We've got huge predators right now. I mean, Wayne Williams was one predator, but right now we're looking at government predators, pharmaceutical predators, corporate predators, and who are their prey? Their prey are our American children. Where is their preying ground? Their hunting ground is the public schools. And this is what we discuss in our book.
And unfortunately, this comes at a time either because of or coincidentally when there's fragmentation of the family and the family doesn't have as much power as it used to have in deciding, you know, how their children are going to be raised and what they're going to be taught via the local school boards. And the families are losing control of raising their own children.
Mm-hmm. We have public school districts that are partnering with government. We have government that's partnering with corporations. And so the parents over here, government, corporations, pharmaceutical companies, and public schools are all here. This has got to change. Well, John, it was an absolute pleasure working on this book with you.
And likewise.
Yeah.
And
it was good.
Because I agree with you. Your ideas about, I like your ideas about inner city violence, because, you know, I was getting to the point, and I might have actually written it in the book, that we're going to have to get sanctuary cities. Every county in the United States is going to have to take some families, you know, from the south side of Chicago, you know, so that they can survive, because
it is that bad. But our mainstream media never covers it. I mean, this should be national news. It's to the point where it's a war zone. It's akin to a war zone.
Yeah, because
but you always post about it. That's how we connected.
Yeah,
because we're on social media together.
But what I liked about your theory is that it's not the neighborhoods. It's not the neighborhoods. You can't just take these people out of the neighborhoods, you know, and put them in sanctuary counties.
And make it better. Yeah.
You need to get at the inner problem, which is the educational system in this country.
That's right. I mean,
that's what I liked, because I had never thought of it that way. You know, I had never thought of it that way, that, you know, these kids are truant. These gangbangers are running around shooting things up. Why aren't they in school? They're truant.
Yeah, well, when you're better educated and not these indoctrination university centers that are turning out people with master's degrees and doctorate degrees, and they're indoctrinated and they don't know it. I'm talking about truly educated, where you can think for yourself and you have critical thinking skills to think beyond what you were taught in college and in K through 12 school. That's a real education. And I'm not talking that you have to have all these fancy degrees, but we need kids who are able to think for themselves. Otherwise, this government, it's it's going to just
They're gonna
keep
follow-
running amok.
They're going to follow the gang leaders.
Yeah,
You know,
and that's what's happening.
and how are you going to tell them that, hey, if you get an education, you can make pretty good money as a videographer, for example.
You make
Well,
very good money.
But what about?
as a
But
videographer.
yeah, but I'm 14 years old and I make $1,000 a day, and they do. The only problem is
they can't
you're
sleep
not going
at
to live
night.
very long.
That's right. They can't sleep at night.
You're not going to live very long.
And this is where critical thinking comes in. Able to think outside of the pack.
They will
able
not.
to
They
be
cannot hear you,
sheep.
but they cannot hear that you're not going to live long.
Yeah. Well, they don't have the critical thinking skills.
Right. That's
Yeah,
what.
this is the
That's the
problem.
point. Right.
Yep, I've been saying this since 2018, since my last book. And now people are starting to talk about critical thinking more and understand the importance of it.